In 1247 AD, London's first mental hospital was constructed. Originally called the Priory of the New Order of Our Lady of Bethlehem, it eventually became known as Bethlehem Royal Hospital, often simply just referred to as Bethlem, or more precisely, among your average citizen living in London at the time, Bedlam. The entire history of this institution is a long and fascinating, if not somewhat morbid story, but needless to say, it's not a place you wanted to end up. It was essentially a prison where mentally ill patients would be packed together in crowded rooms, chained to walls, and subjected to archaic treatments that can only be described as torture. The notoriety of Bedlam was so widespread that by the late 1600s, the name itself became synonymous with chaos, disorder, and confusion. Which is why, even to this day, when something is described as utter bedlam, it conjures images of total anarchy. So when Dungeons & Dragons rolls in with a new monster called the Black Beast of Bedlam, the insatiable allure of alliteration aside, you know to expect something chaotic. Welcome to Monster of the Week, the only show on the internet filmed live on location from the Far Realm. Today we are talking about a monster that doesn't just create chaos, but is, in essence, the idea of chaos itself. The Black Beast of Bedlam. As always, we're going to talk about what this bizarre creature is, its lore and ecology, and of course some ways you might use it in your D&D campaign. I've also converted it from 3rd edition into 5e with some shiny new artwork, so you can deploy this horror no matter what version of D&D you enjoy. Unless you're playing 1st, 2nd, or 4th edition, I guess in that case you're on your own. But whether you're playing 5e or even another TTRPG altogether, this week's sponsor, Game Theory Tables, has got you covered. Segue. Say goodbye to traditional setups and get ready to embrace the future we were promised in all those pulp sci-fi novels of the past. We might not have flying cars, but we sure as heck do have awesome game tables that will revolutionize the way you play games. Introducing from Game Theory Tables, the world's first touchscreen game table. This bad boy has dynamic maps, interactive character sheets, and endless customization, all at your fingertips. It's also fully compatible with all your favorite online RPG websites such as Roll20, D&D Beyond, and Foundry. Plus, you can use it like a regular table for popcorn and dice or whatever. Whether you're playing classic board games, TTRPGs, or something more modern, this deluxe touchscreen table will bring all your tabletop experiences to life with stunning visuals, intuitive controls, and seamless gameplay. You've never crushed a family member in Monopoly until you've done it playing on one of these bad boys. And if you do decide to back their Kickstarter, which is currently live in the link down below, you can get a massive discount on this table. Also, all of their original non-digital game tables will be offered at a discounted price too. So if you're not interested in all the digital features of the latest and greatest model, there are tons of more traditional options that are sure to suit any need you could conceivably have. There has never been a better time to get a gaming table, so if it's something you're interested in, please check out the Kickstarter for yourself and see what you think. Thank you so much to Game Theory Tables for bringing us here this week to talk about a horrible nightmare creature. I truly appreciate it. Speaking of which, we've got an aberration from the plane of madness to talk about. So get comfortable and don't touch anything that looks like it came from a different plane of reality, because it's time for Monster of the Week. The Black Beast of Bedlam certainly lives up to its namesake. They have bodies made up of a black tar-like substance, they are clearly some kind of beast, albeit a horrific one, and they are about as chaotic as a creature can be. But more on that in a minute. First, let's talk about where this monster even came from. In March of 2007, Dragon Magazine issue 353 had just hit the shelves and provided us with the first mention of this week's monster. In an article beginning on page 64 entitled Outsiders of the Forgotten Realms, we were given stats and a bit of ecology information for a handful of monsters for 3rd edition. These monsters were all outsiders, which is a classification that does not exist in 5e D&D, but was used to categorize creatures from outside the material plane, such as angels and demons. Now, funnily enough, there are no actual stats for the Beast of Bedlam in this issue of Dragon Magazine, but it is mentioned. On page 66, there's a brief section that talks about how some of these outsiders might appear in settings other than the Forgotten Realms, and curiously, the article explains how something called a Black Beast of Bedlam lives in the windswept depths of Pandemonium, and in Eberron, they might stalk the churning chaos of Kithri. I'm sure this confused some readers. While I don't have the whole story here, I'm assuming it was a case of either the monster stat block itself or the artwork not being ready in time to meet the magazine's deadline, but they forgot to take this bit of text mentioning it out of the sidebar entry for the lore and ecology part of the article. But in any case, the beast would appear 2 months later with art and game statistics as part of Dragon 355 in May of 2007. Longtime viewers of the channel might recognize this as the same micro-bestiary that the Obliviax Memory Moss's 3rd edition stat block came from. And while there are a few other beasties in here we're definitely going to talk about eventually, the Black Beast of Bedlam specifically appears on page 33. The artwork here is uncanny in the best way. It perfectly suggests that this thing was mere moments ago something that resembled a human. I mean, sure, it's a tentacle beast, but look at the 2 tendrils on the right. They look an awful lot like legs, and towards the front we have a tendril awfully similar to a malformed humanoid arm. And none of this is accidental, of course, because this bad boy is a shapeshifter, sort of. The Beast of Bedlam is able to cast Disguise Self at will, which isn't an amazing illusion spell or anything, but it will let you pass as a human from a distance. As long as nobody tries to touch you or gets too close, chances are you'll probably be fine. So now imagine that you see a totally normal looking guy on a street corner suddenly erupt into this thing. That seems bad. But what exactly is this thing? What is the Beast of Bedlam? After all, appearances can be deceiving. Maybe they're actually super chill, and they just want to hang out and be kind to others while they fulfill their niche in the ecosystem.
No.
In their natural state, a Beast of Bedlam is constantly changing its appearance. They writhe, slither, and boil in an amorphous chorus of shapes that might vaguely suggest resemblance to other mortal creatures which they've encountered. They also typically carry around a humanoid skull, usually from a recent victim, and use it to channel whatever horrible things they have to say in a facsimile of conversation with a living being.
I am a skin of evil!
So, I guess they're not beating the Eldritch Horror allegations after all. It's not known specifically which plane of existence the Beast of Bedlam hails from, but it's definitely not the material plane. Most scholars assume they hail from the Far Realm given their whole thing, but they can also be found roaming the many layers of the Abyss. Basically, they're just drawn to chaotic environments as they themselves are an expression of chaos. But that doesn't mean they don't venture to other planes and cause trouble from time to time. Their nature is so tumultuous that merely making contact physically with one of these creatures in any way is enough to irreparably change and mutate another living creature's body. If this is sounding remotely familiar to you and you're not sure why, or maybe you know exactly why, you know what I'm about to say, this is a very similar MO to the Chaos Beast, a creature I covered on the channel a couple years ago, and then another time like 8 years before that. And that's because the Beast of Bedlam is meant to be a sort of boss monster version of the Chaos Beast. Where the Chaos Beast clocks in at a CR of 6, the Beast of Bedlam is a whopping CR 13. Essentially, the Beast of Bedlam takes everything chaotic and terrible about the Chaos Beast and cranks it up to 11. And the results are nothing if not effective. The Black Beast of Bedlam has a speed of 60 feet, which is pretty fast for an amorphous goo monster. It's immune and resistant to a bunch of different damage types, and as a creature whose form is constantly changing, much like the YouTube algorithm, it's impossible to know what its next move will be. It has 2 claw attacks it can make every turn, and these attacks not only do a bit of damage, but also threaten to turn the target into a spongy mass of flesh.
Excuse me, what?
Due to its corporeal instability trait, a trait that it shares with the Chaos Beast, anytime this thing hits you with a claw attack, you must succeed on a DC 18 Constitution saving throw. And if you fail, you turn into a beanbag chair made of meat. In this state, you will of course be imposed with some difficulties, such as a -4 to your dexterity and disadvantage on all attack rolls. But that might be a good thing, because you'll also spend every one of your turns in this form blindly attacking anything that gets close to you. If you happen to be someone who possesses a strong enough sense of self, you can reverse this horrible transformation by landing a charisma save at the end of your turn, but even on a success, you're only going to regain your true form for 1 minute. Since you have literally been infected with the Beast of Bedlam's essence, this is a permanent effect until someone casts Lesser Restoration or an equivalent type of magic on you. It is worth noting that both Stone Skin and Shape Change have a unique interaction with this condition in that they allow you to maintain your proper form for the duration of the spell. So while not a permanent fix, a casting of Stone Skin might be just what the cleric ordered, at least until you can make your way to a temple or someone else that can cast True Restoration on you, or Lesser Restoration. One of the restorations, if, however, you don't manage to regain your form either through magic or force of will, you unfortunately will lose 1 point of wisdom for each round you spend in this amorphous form. And if you lose all your wisdom, unfortunately you are permanently transformed into a Chaos Beast. That's right, the Black Beast of Bedlam is the progenitor of every Chaos Beast at large. So anytime you see a Chaos Beast, just know that it can trace its origin back to something a lot scarier. Not that they're not scary, but it can always be worse. Speaking of being a lot scarier, we haven't even talked about the beast's mockery trait yet. This thing can mimic both humanoid voices and animal sounds it's heard, which is creepy. Apparently, they are also gifted ventriloquists, because not only can they mimic these sounds, but they can also make it seem as if they are coming from any point within 30 feet of them. Now obviously this is a really useful tool for setting up ambushes and messing with your opponents in various ways, but the Beast of Bedlam cranks up the what the fuck factor by using this ability to mimic the voices of creatures it has previously slain. It especially loves doing this in order to taunt others within the vicinity who may have known its last victim. So that's cool.
Emotional damage!
And speaking of speaking, something else I find particularly disturbing about this monster is its purely malefic intellect. They have an intelligence score of 16, which is well above your average humanoid, and they can speak several languages. Among them, Common. So, you could totally have a conversation with this creature, although I don't know if you'd like anything they have to say. Now on to the rest of the actions this creature has access to. It can do plenty other things aside from just making a couple claw attacks. It can use an ability once per day called Damning Darkness, which is basically just the darkness spell, except it also does psychic damage to anyone caught in the area. It also has the capacity to blast out a 20-foot sphere of toxic gas centered on itself. This is essentially just a casting of the Cloud Kill spell, meaning it does a ton of poison damage to anybody caught within the Eldritch Fart. It's also got a handful of spells that augment its abilities and damage, such as Confusion, Detect Evil and Good, Shatter, Tongues, and Phantasmal Killer. Oh, and the Skull. Almost forgot about that little tidbit. Earlier I mentioned that these things usually tote around a skull as a grisly trophy. And while they may be fond of using their mimicry ability to make the skull talk, they can also use it as a sonic emitter to unleash a horrifying screech. Anyone within 60 feet who can hear the sound being emitted by this screaming skull has to make a saving throw, and if they fail, they are frightened of the beast. You know, in case you needed another reason to be frightened of this thing. Unfortunately, that essentially sums up all of the mechanical aspects of the Black Beast of Bedlam. Because it's intelligent, it's got lots of options at its disposal for how it wants to operate. It might attack stealthily from the shadows in a sort of ambush, or it might just burst in and start turning fools into flesh orbs. But whatever it chooses to do, as the DM, keep in mind that it is pretty intelligent, so whatever schemes it comes up with, it's not going to go off half-cocked. Speaking of which, let's talk about how we can actually use this thing at the game table. So like any nest of goopy tentacles and tendrils, the Beast of Bedlam can make for a great high-level encounter. Your adventuring group coming across one of these things in a place like the Abyss is an excellent way to showcase that there are more things besides demons lurking in the dark. Either by itself, or if you're feeling spicy, accompanied by a group of chaos beasts. this thing could make for a pretty good encounter. Or maybe it's just traveling with some demons or something and working with them to build a functioning portal to the material plane. I've never met a horrible eldritch goop monster whose machinations weren't improved by the inclusion of demons. I could also see a chaos beast operating as a cult leader in the depths of a large city, panning out in an interesting way. Maybe it's established itself a nice little chaos cult, where it promises the cult members transcendence from the prison of order. And once a cultist proves themselves worthy to the cause, the Beast of Bedlam uses its power to turn them into a chaos beast. Now, it's just biding its time, building its ranks, and forming a scheme that will allow it to send the city into chaos and corrupt as many living creatures as possible. And I mean, hey, maybe it's not even the grand puppet master here. Perhaps the beast is just being used as a tool by an even more nefarious individual. And if you don't love the cult idea, perhaps this other individual is some kind of mad scientist type wizard or artificer, using the beast's innate abilities to test the limits of humanoid physiology. They could be up to all kinds of heinous body horror type experiments, and then it just falls to the players to stop them. Maybe the party is even captured by this guy, and in order to avoid becoming another one of his spongy amorphous experiments, they must escape the mad scientist's lair. Or perhaps it's something less overtly evil, and this mad scientist character has merely found a way to harness the beast's power in order to change humanoid physiology in more subtle ways. He could be running what is essentially a high-concept plastic surgery clinic, using the beast's abilities to reshape faces and other body parts people in the city want changed, in exchange for lots and lots of gold, of course. Maybe the party decides to investigate this mysterious plastic surgeon who seemed to spring up out of nowhere, only to find the beast, and it's trapped, and it pleads with them for its freedom, manipulating them into setting it free, only to have the players unleash a true horror onto the city streets. But at the end of the day, this horrifying goop monster is great, and I don't think we can ever have too many of those. As always, if you do want to use this monster, linked in the description down below is a Google document which contains all of the information you will need to successfully run this creature at your game table. And if you are one of my lovely patrons over the Dungeon Dad Patreon page, you can of course find the high-res PDF stat block, which is all the same information as what's in the Google document, it's just presented in a much nicer way. And we've got some new original artwork over there as well, which this week was done by the lovely Tam. I will link to their art profile over on Twitter in the description down below, so show them some love. And thank you so much, Tam, for bringing this horrible nightmare creature to life. Speaking of patrons, I also want to give a massive shout out to this week's Patron of the Week. Thank you so much to Jordan, Canada. As a fellow resident of this beautiful country, it means the most to have your support, Mr. Canada. I truly appreciate it. And thank you for watching. As always, if you like what I'm doing here and you want to support the channel aside from Patreon, just liking the video, leaving a comment, that stuff helps me out tremendously. And if there is a monster from a previous edition of D&D, another tabletop role-playing game, or wherever, that you would like to see converted into 5th edition and talked about on this channel, let me know in the comments down below or over on the Dungeon Dad Discord, which is also linked in the description down below in the Monster Suggestions channel. And who knows? You might just see it show up on an episode of Monster of the Week. Thank you guys so much for watching. I also just want to give a quick, teaser. I think it's going to be next week's video. It might be the one after that, depending on how my time shakes out. But there's a really big video coming. I don't know, it might end up being over an hour. It's technically going to be a Monster of the Week, but it's going to be big. So get ready for that. I don't really know what I should say about it aside from it is about one of my favorite monsters that I've talked about before on this channel, but they've suddenly become very relevant again. In any case, whether that ends up being next week or the week after, I will see you in the next upload. Thank you for watching. Till then.
Something about this statue gives me the creeps. It might just be something about the way it looks. Or it could have something to do with the belt of petrified human hands around its waist. Next episode, Blackstone Gigant. Tune in next time for lots more fan service.